God, those actual words.
I quote,
No,
yeah, I was furious, absolutely
that's
furious.
outrageous.
Yeah.
Welcome to Opening Ceremony. I'm Jess May, and I'm here for enthusiasts, for iconoclasts, for anarchists, and for you, my constellation. So, welcome everybody. I've got a real treat for you today. I'm very, very, very excited because I have my lovely, lovely friend here, someone we trained together. So we have a long history of being celebrants together. And I'm just going to quickly tell you a little bit about her. So is Miranda Ash, everybody. Would you please be upstanding, standing room only for Miranda Ash, who some of you know from the Academy of Modern Celebrancy. Most of you will know her just because she's a legend, like I know her for that too. So Miranda Ash is a celebrant with a rich and varied career behind her and ahead of her, I would say, now firmly rooted in creating warm, authentic ceremonies across the UK and beyond. She's got 13 years experience, like me, and in this particular role as a celebrant. And she's known for her down-to-earth approach, I can concur, thoughtful touches, and a strong belief in community over competition. And there's no one who will champion you more. I do have quite a lot of celebrants in my constellation, and I know you'll be listening, and I know you'll tune in because she's a coup. So you'll be thinking, I can't wait to hear her backstory, her origin story. And I know that she'll tell you everything she can about it. So yeah, tune in. Please be seated and get comfortable. And she really does not do competition, this person. She does not. She will champion you at every step of the way. And that's why she's doing so much with the Academy. In 2023, I'm so proud. She was named the Wedding Industry Awards National Celebrant of the Year. So, I'm moving in very high circles here. And she mentors celebrants, all of those celebrants out there who are listening. She mentors you through this academy and the Celebrant Success Accelerator, which is really, really interesting and can help all of us out there who feel a little bit lonely working as celebrants. It's brilliant because it will give you that kick and that little bit of accountability and loads of stuff around mindset, which leads me neatly on to what Miranda would love to share with you today. She's big on mindset. Many, many times we've met over the past 13 years, and she's given me a little pep talk over a meal. We normally go somewhere to a nice restaurant. We go to a pub and we sit down. And one year, I remember you saying to me, Miranda, what would happen if your worst fear came true? I think that's one of your lines, isn't it? What would happen if your worst fear came true? And I thought about it and I thought, not much, actually. I think we'd be fine. So if anyone in the world is going to make you feel like getting up in the morning and feeling like you're the most amazing person, it's Miranda. And one of the reasons why we're going to talk about mindset and self-worth today is because we have a shared knowledge. It's not just a belief, it's a knowledge because we've witnessed it. We know that people who have ceremonies to celebrate themselves, by extension, really, really grow their self-worth. And I think that's a lot of why we do it. It is about being embedded in community. That also plays into your self-worth. So what she's chosen to share with us today is some insights around ceremony and self-worth. And a little bit of that goes into her background and her professional background in other areas. But really, I've just asked her to share her passions with us. And we all know that it's ceremony, so it won't take much. So I'm just going to let her introduce herself for those of you who don't know her already.
That is such a lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
It's true. It's all true. I love you to pieces. And it's wonderful having you in my life.
Well, and it's wonderful having you in mind. And it's amazing that, we trained together 13 years ago. We just had those few days together in Hebden Bridge. And look what happened out of it.
I was thinking that this morning. It was Hebden Bridge, wasn't it? We went to this lesbian capital of Europe, is it? Or maybe the world. Let's say the world. And we landed, in Hebden Bridge. If you don't know about Hebden Bridge out there, you must look it up. Because the weird thing was we connected because we had Surrey connections down here in the south. And now I'm down here again. But why we ended up in Hebden Bridge is anyone's guess. It's so random, isn't it?
Well, and because we could have done our training down south, but I chose to do my training up north, partly because the trainer was someone that I wanted to work with. And the other reason is, frankly, I wanted a trip up north and I could stay with family whilst I was up there. And it's funny because a few weeks ago, I was up north again. meeting one of my couples for this year, and not too far from Hebden Bridge, so it brought back happy memories. But yeah, amazing to see what's happened for both of us in the last 13 years. Yeah, but as you said, a little bit about self-worth and mindset. My background prior to becoming, or actually up until fairly recently, I've been a mindset and leadership coach. And I think one of the things that I've noticed both in the ceremonies that I've worked on, the celebrants that I've coached, and the executives and CEOs that I've coached over the years is the secret sauce to success is your self-worth. And that's not self-confidence. That's self-worth as in valuing yourself, um, even on your worst day. So valuing yourself in a humble, graceful way rather than, valuing yourself based on an ego. And it also relates to community, because I think when you're in a community of high self-worth individuals, you lift up and you support each other. And the same with the people that we work with. And I think as a celebrant, you have to have a really high sense of self-worth in order to be able to be at your best and serve the people that you are serving, not just the couples and the families, but also those people that are in the presence of those ceremonies. So yeah, it's a real passion of mine, because I did not have a great sense of self-worth about 15 years ago. Even when I became a celebrant, I was struggling with my self-worth. And a coach shared with me that it was something that I really needed to work on. When I became a celebrant, I was at a pretty low point, but I had a glimmer of hope becoming a celebrant and a glimmer of joy. I was in the midst of a very big grief journey, but that spurred me to really start to learn to value myself, to stand on my own 2 feet, to be grounded and centered and value my worth. And it's just been a thread through my life for the last 13 years, I think, as a result. So
It
yeah,
gives hope for us all. I mean, I find it really hard to imagine you having low self-worth. I love that. I love that you shared that as well. And I don't think I really realized that when we met, that you were going through that at that
yeah.
point.
I mean, I think, sometimes if we're outgoing and extrovert, we can, and I'm an introvert, extrovert, ambivert, I think it is, um, we can hide it. And that's not to say I don't have bad days, but what I do when I have a bad day is I look back and think, okay, I'm having a bad day, but I am still grounded in my sense of worth. It also, as a celebrant, it guides all sorts of areas of my business as well as my life. It guides how I choose to show up and run my business, and obviously be that believer in community, but also making sure that I'm standing for my own sense of worth, in terms of how I charge, how I run the business, as well as the worth of the families that I work with, and celebrating that.
I love that in so many ways. One of my soapboxes is celebrants not charging enough, because you and I have both made that mistake for quite a long time, and then you realize you can't afford your bills. But also it's not that, it's not just that, it's just that most of us come to this with the most amazing box of tricks. We've done loads of stuff by the time we get to it. And I remember asking Lita what was it that made us qualified to do the course that we did in Hebden Bridge. And she said with people that do celebrancy tend to be self-selecting. They tend to be at that point in their life where they have gathered all the skills that they need in order to go into something that they know they have the nature for, they have the personality for, which I thought was really interesting.
That is. That's really interesting. And it's interesting because when I mentor students at AMC, on my kickoff call with them, I always ask them, why are you here? What are you bringing? And some of them will look at me and go, I don't know what I'm bringing to being a celebrant, but actually you're bringing a heck of a lot. And you just have to remind people you've got all of that shared knowledge, that knowledge, that story, that career, that journey, that all plays into bringing you to celebrancy. And I think a lot of people come into celebrancy because they're looking for something more purposeful, maybe, that hits, the endorphins in the way that they want, that is bringing all those gifts together. You look at for me, as you've said, community's always been important to me. I trained as a social worker. I've been, a huge proponent and working in different communities over the years. And more recently, even during COVID, online communities have become important. And I just see the power of community and that shared experience. But I think ceremony plays into that too. Ceremonies bring those communities together. And that's what I find fascinating about being a celebrant. One of the things we don't do enough in the West is celebrate the power of those communities, the power of those relationships with ceremonies. And I'm not just talking about weddings and funerals, the celebrations of life and namings. There's so much more. And those ceremonies are a way to, what's the expression? They're a way to amplify someone's sense of worth as well. So that's why they're so important. And I look back at what other, through history. I'm a bit of a history nerd, and I studied sociology and anthropology. So I love different cultures, and I love infusing historical and cultural elements and belief-based elements into ceremonies too. But I look back at what past cultures and tribes had done, and we don't do enough of what they did uh, today. We just get caught up in our busy lives. And I think if we came back to that sense of celebrating the community, celebrating those milestones, it would ground us a lot more, and it would enable people to have the space to explore their own sense of love or worth, whatever it is, in the heart of a community that supports them.
Because you're being told that you belong. I mean, we used to do that with baptisms with babies. You're naming a child, you're declaring them to the world, you're saying that you're a human life and you really matter. And I think that's what you're saying about your love when you have a public declaration of love, or even a private elopement ceremony where you're committing to each other. What you're saying is this is valuable. I once did a course way back when I worked in a hospice, and this woman, she was a therapeutic counselor at that time. I think she was called a psychodynamic counselor. And we did a thing about attentive listening, and I think to this day it has changed the course of my life. It's why I do what I do. It's why I'm good at what I do here. And I remember when we started, and I had no idea about therapy at that point. And she said, "We're going to light a candle," and we all looked at each other, as in the days when you could light candles at a venue. And she lit this candle, and she said, "Now we're all going to sit in quiet and light this candle at the beginning of this ceremony and this experience, because it indicates value. We are setting this hour as a valuable time, and that is the symbol of that. And at the end, we'll blow it out." And I think ceremonies, they're the candle. They're that marking out a time in which to say, human life is important, you are important. It's putting your phone away, it's paying attention. I'm interested in your fascination with cultures, which we share because you study sociology, anthropology, like all the cultural stuff. We have that, shared thing and shared history. I also love history. And I think we learn a lot from it. And one of the things that I think perhaps you've learned is living in Mexico, because living there, you've got Day of the Dead and you've still got that culture, haven't you? And that history is still alive. Would you say that has impacted your work?
Yes, absolutely. And Mexico's a really good example. I mean, I've traveled all over the world. I've looked at what cultures and groups in Haiti have done, for instance, all over Europe, parts of Africa. But I then 26 years ago, 26 years ago, spent some time in Bolivia working with groups up in the rainforest. And then more recently, my husband and I lived in Mexico for 14 months, and I just found and still find, and we go to Mexico every few years, I found Mexico absolutely, utterly intoxicating, and was trying to put my finger on why, because it's just like every country, it has huge contrasts. And, we're fed one version of the Mexico story by the media. And when you go there and you go to the non-touristy areas, you discover it's something completely different. That said, I did live in quite a touristy area in central Mexico. But it was an area that where the Mexican Revolution began and where history is celebrated. And to give you a few examples, some friends of ours have a ranch, and on the ranch is a pyramid. In fact, they believe that there could be hundreds of pyramids on this ranch. It's the only one that's been excavated, and it's flat at the top, and it's inverted, and it's very rare because that apparently shows that it's a female pyramid, and they found two bodies, two skeletons, ancient skeletons of women inside the grounds of the pyramid, which then denote that it's female. And I've always been fascinated by the different elements of different cultures throughout the years in Mexico. We're talking thousands of years from the Aztecs and the Incas up to the modern day. In the more modern day, you have Day of the Dead, which celebrates, although it is an ancient tradition, it's just being more modernized, but it happens on the 2nd of November every year. Excuse me. And it's known to be the night when your ancestors come back from the dead to celebrate. And one of the things I love about Mexican culture is that they celebrate death. It's not something to necessarily mourn in the same way. They do handle the death process very quickly. So usually you'll have a visitation in the family home within 24 hours, and then the funeral takes place within 36 to 48 hours. And then every year, the families will take a picnic, and they will go to the crematory, to the cemetery, and they decorate the graves with marigolds and candles, and they celebrate that person returning for one night to celebrate with the family. They also have massive parades in a lot of towns, and certainly they did in ours, where people dress up in black suits, and for the women, they're usually typically black Victorian type dresses, and they paint their faces like a skull. And again, it's a big party, and the villages and towns will be decorated with altars made out of different colors of mostly marigolds, but also other flowers. And they have offerings on the altars, and the altars are the offerings to their loved ones. So you'll have them in every house with candles and photographs and food and different trinkets that represent each of their ancestors, and also across the community in public spaces. So it's just a big party. And I have always wanted to bring a little bit of that to our culture. Now, some people would say that to bring Day of the Dead to a British culture would be cultural misappropriation. I don't necessarily think it is. I think it's taking the pieces that are more general and meaningful, and help us to understand our own concept of love and death. Um, so it's bright, it's colorful, it's a party, and it's about saying we honor our ancestors and we party with you once a year to celebrate you. And to this day, we still have an altar in our house every year, and I did one last year. Trying to get fresh marigolds in October in the UK, though, was a little interesting.
I love marigolds. Marigolds remind me of my mum. We used to have them in the garden, that really distinctive smell. So that is, a lot of people might be thinking, well, that's not a ceremony, that's festival. And I think they are indivisible. I can't, so that's really fantastic. I think.
Yeah, and you see parts of that in wedding ceremonies in Mexico as well. So they parade on Day of the Dead, and they parade at weddings. So yeah,
Parade. Oh
yeah.
my God, how
So they
lovely.
parade. You have that festival, and they're synonymous. So the type of the festival vibes, the parade is part of weddings in Mexico. So after the couple, and I gate crashed a few weddings while we were in Mexico, did a few too. I gate crashed a few in a church. So after they've had the church ceremony, the couple will come out of whatever they're doing. They'll come out of the church or the building, and there'll usually be a couple of donkeys waiting with saddles on them with tequila bottles on either side. Then you'll usually have a couple of life-size puppets. So they're huge puppets that are on backpacks with people underneath, one of the bride, one of the groom, or whatever. And then you'll have waiters with bottles of tequila and little cups of tequila. They're only about this big on a piece of ribbon that you put around your neck. And as you parade around town with the donkeys, the puppets, and the mariachi band to celebrate your wedding, so you'll walk um, from the church to the wedding reception venue. Um, you'll have tequila, so they'll fill up your tequila cups, and sometimes the couple will parade at the front. Sometimes they'll be in a carriage or in a car, but it's just one big festival. And so every Saturday, literally pretty much every Saturday in town, there were multiple weddings doing this, and you would just walk around town and see this going on, and it's just a big celebration. And you see that idea of celebration throughout all the milestones of life in Mexican culture.
I have never ever heard of that. And now I've got a big thing to do a mini series about parades.
Mm.
Excuse me. I am going to do a mini series about pilgrimage, but I feel like that might need to come in as well. So while we're talking about ceremonies that have really excited you, one of my questions, as you know, if you're in my constellation, is to always ask my guests what their favorite ceremonies are that they've been to or done, and what their worst are. Now, for many people who aren't celebrants, this is not a difficult question, right? No, that's fine. Oh, it's this one and it's this one. But for us, they're all our babies. So bear with her, because Miranda's got 13 years worth of amazing things that she's done, and she's loved all of her couples the same, and all of her families that she's done funerals for the same. So for her, choosing a favorite ceremony is a big deal, and she might even have to choose one that she hasn't done herself because she doesn't like to favor her children. So I'm going to let her choose.
It's very, very, very difficult to pick, and I'm going to choose two. Sorry to just indulge me.
You'd have to.
One isn't a wedding. One was a transition ceremony, and it was very private. It was for someone who was about to have surgery and had had a very, very difficult journey, and wanted to do something to honor where they'd been, but also to embrace the new. And so we did a fire ceremony, fire and water actually. And it was just me, their three chosen family, and that person on a beach at dusk. And we lit a fire bowl. And one of the things that they had done throughout their life was write in journals. And they had kept them all. And some of them were very painful, some of them were not. And they wanted to create the space to let go. And so we burnt some of the journals, not all, but some of them. They selected a couple that they wanted to burn in the fire bowl. And then I presented them with a new journal that they could start to write in the next day, which was a couple of days before they had their top surgery. And it was almost like a baptism. They needed to let go, but they also wanted to embrace the new. And because it was on a beach, afterwards we all ran into the water. And it was like the water rushing over all of us, not just them. So all of us ran into the water and had that shared baptism experience, but more so supporting them so that they could then come out of the water feeling anew. And we put some symbolism around that and some words around that. And it was such a powerful experience. And, as a celebrant, you treat those moments with such reverence. It was one I didn't talk about for a long time because it just left me um, feeling so privileged to have been able to be one of the people to hold that space for them for that moment. And it was unlike anything I'd done before. So it really was memorable. And it's one that, I don't publicly show photographs of the event because it's private. And I think a lot of these are private moments, kind of like an elopement for a wedding. And you respect that person for wanting that privacy. Um, yeah, and it was just absolute. The only word I can use to describe it, the feeling was profound. So that was one. And in terms of weddings, oh my gosh, don't kill me for all of my couples that might be listening to this thing. Why didn't she pick us?
This
Uh,
is what's awful, isn't it? It's a horrible thing to ask a celebrant. Horrible. But just quickly, that the thing about the transition ceremony that is so beautiful, and it's an absolute first. So you chose well. So I think your couples will forgive you because it's a matter of degrees. Okay, people, if you're listening, it is a matter of degrees. She
yeah,
loves you all. I
yeah, I
promise.
do absolutely. Um, One thing I've learned as a celebrant is um, to be authentic. And when I wasn't being authentic, that's when things were not going well. And then when I learnt to be comfortable in my own skin, to celebrate who I am, to be the quirky nerd that I can be, then that's when I started to attract the couples who fit that vibe. And especially in the last few years, I've worked with a lot of couples who are definitely more on the as and the self-described nerds, and history buffs, and more quirky festival color, but also celebrating different beliefs. And I did a wedding last November that was, oh my gosh, really, really special.
Okay, tell me. I can't wait now. I can't
It
wait.
was a Norse pagan themed wedding. And it took place in Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire, which is the oldest still inhabited castle by the same family. It's over 950 years old. And this was for a couple who had met online playing Elder Scrolls. They were real kind of gaming nerds and history buffs, multinational. So one lived overseas and one lived here. And when I was referred to them by another celebrant who felt that they were more my vibe, and when we met, oh, just yeah, just got on like a house on fire. I'm probably the more extroverted than them, but they're extroverted in a different way. And they poured everything into creating a really authentic experience. So, for example, I've got a few here, not from their wedding, but from something else. Um, there were crystals everywhere decorating the venue. These, by the way, are for a venue when a wedding I've got coming up in a couple of weeks, with a hand fasting in crystals. Um, and they decorated the venue with crystals, candles. They put a gaming room in place after the ceremony. They had a tarot card reader. They served the most incredible food, and yes, I did stay, with venison, and just created an experience for all of their family and friends that was totally unique and personal to them. So they did some really interesting things in the ceremony one thing that I'd not seen done before, which is why I loved being a part of it. So they had a ring warming. They they did a hand fasting, but they created their own cord themselves, and their friend actually did the tying the knot, which I love when, I can just step back and kind of hold the space and for someone else to come in and do it, which is great fun. We had a few Lord of the Rings vibes and references to Dungeons and Dragons and Elder Scrolls. But what they'd also created, and I actually got it here, which I thought was lovely. The groom is a Norse pagan and wanted to share some of those ideas with his family and friends. So they created an order of service, but in it they put the what the meaning behind each of the crystals that were decorating the venue. And then the most unusual thing that we did, which I absolutely loved, in ancient Celtic and Norse cultures, when a couple was married, what they would do would be to the entire village or community would come together to raise a rune stone. And you'll still see these in Pictish cultures when you go and travel in the Highlands of Scotland. You'll see these standing stones, but they're decorated with Pictish drawings, or in Norse cultures, symbols. And so, what they'll do is in Norse cultures, they'll cast some runes to read, and then they will also inscribe a stone with those symbols. And so this couple, in a nod to that, had a much smaller runestone, which is it was a piece of limestone, and it was probably about this size in a box that some friends had made for them literally a couple of nights before, and they'd had the runes that are pertinent to them and their marriage inscribed on the runestone. And so, as a final symbolic act in the ceremony, they sort of raised this runestone. It was, we couldn't bring a huge big slab of limestone into the ceremony area. It was also upstairs. So they just had a little piece that they raised to show that they were now married, and it was just really powerful. And the last time we think a rune raising was done in the UK was in the 12th century, and it symbolized the change between Norse Celtic culture and Christianity. So it's just we were, all of us involved, a history nerd, so we enjoyed researching all of that and bringing it into the ceremony. It was also totally my color scheme with a lot of purple as well.
Oh my God, I've gone really, for both of those, I've gone all tingly. You know, when you get goosebumps, if you're listening to this, I really hope it's obvious to you that our theme about self-worth makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you're taking someone who's transitioning from, and they have said, I trust you to take me from this part of my life to the next, that is extraordinary. And that is saying my life is worth something and my story matters. When we went and did our training at Bridge all those years ago, we were told, and I've never forgotten it, Miranda. I remember Lita saying, it's about transition. Every ceremony that you do, you come in one thing and you go out another. It's a pivotal moment of transformation in your life. And I still believe that. And so when you're talking about this thing with the ancientness, if you're not familiar with ceremony, you might not understand why I'm so passionate about it, why I'm doing this. It is because I believe it makes human life richer. I think it is humanizing. In a world of Donald Trump and Elon Musk et al., where everything is becoming dehumanized, we need the hope of anything that is humanizing, that isn't AI, that is about touch and feeling. So you've got this thing. You're in this amazing moment with both of these ceremonies, and I know there's more, so I'm going to get you back and we'll do more. We'll let everybody choose. Like what we'll have the constellation say, I want to hear about, like, I want to hear 3 weddings and I want to hear however many. So we'll do some more. We'll do a whole thing that's about our favorites. But if you're doing a thing where you're looking at your history and you're involving a person that you trust in exploring your history, that's immediately community. And it's connecting to the past and the future. So you're transitioning literally from our traditional historical past into our future on a meta level. And then within it, you're transforming from pre-marriage to post-marriage. And you're also affirming all the games that you play and the story of how you met and how that is interwoven with the games that you're playing and all the things that you love. And then you're inviting all the people in your life into your story, and you're saying, we value this about ourselves so much that we want you to share in it and participate, and you are part of why our lives matter. So they were really, really good choices. I mean, amazing.
Something's just clicked for me, well, as a reminder in what we've just shared there too, is one of the common things a lot of couples say to me in the run up to their wedding, the stress, the people pleasing that goes on, should we say? Keeping up with the Joneses, having to invite people, feeling obligated to invite people that they really don't want there. And I've talked a lot about this on social media recently because I've had a number of conversations with a few couples I'm supporting this year who are having that challenge. And case in point, a couple reached out to me this week and they said, we've just decided to change our wedding and our ceremony. We're, fed up with the stress of trying to please everyone. And we've realized, and I'd said this to them when we met, this wedding is about you. It's not about anyone else. It's about you standing up and declaring your love for each other and standing for your shared sense of worth together. And I think it clicked for them because they came back and said, we've decided we want to do this, blah, 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 in this way instead. And I wrote back and said, I will 100% champion and support you all the way. Well done for standing for what's right for you. Um, and you want that for people in the midst of all of that so-called wedding stress that doesn't need to be there when you really understand what your ceremony is about.
Exactly. And I think this is what was my doorbell, sorry. Um, if you're a newbie celebrant, you will know that very quickly you're going to have to become very flexible when things kick off and stuff happen. You just have to style it out. So sorry
Absolutely.
about that. So the self-worth thread, it's so interesting. I think we're both people that champion, aren't we? I think I'm exactly the same. I think there's a very much a lot of why I do it, and it's a lot of why I do this, because I have people on who might be doing stuff that might not particularly be valued by society at large. It might not be about making money. It might not be about prestige, but it might be something that they are doing for the world that is just incredible and so important. I feel like I'm going to talk forever. I just need to check the time because I don't think we're going to have enough time for everything we want to say. I'm as passionate about it now as I was when we met.
Yeah,
It's
me too.
still amazing. And the more you do, the more you think,
Yeah.
this is so brilliant. So tell me about a ceremony that was less good, that you did not love.
This ceremony really taught me to trust my gut. Big thing for new celebrants. Trust your intuition, trust your gut. I always say this to new celebrants because if you don't, this is when things can go wrong. I was asked to do a wedding some years ago, and the couple, this is kind of when I first started, so I learned a lot from it. Well, not, it was probably within 3 years of starting. And they booked me. We got on really great on the discovery call. Then we came to meeting and they turned up over an hour late with no apology. And I my gut was saying, yeah, is this going to be right? And also, when it came to doing their questionnaire, they put very little into it, despite a lot of encouragement. And I'd actually said to them, if you're struggling to do the questionnaires, let me know and we can have a conversation. And they just weren't interested. Um, and on the day of the wedding, the week before the wedding, I still hadn't been paid, and so I ended up calling them and saying, "I'm really sorry if I've already delivered the ceremony script to you. All of that's done as per our contract. If I don't get paid today, no ceremony." Got paid straight away. On the day of the ceremony, I turned up an hour and a half beforehand, and all the guests were there, but no groom. None of the wedding party were there. No one. And the guests had all were showing me invitations saying, please arrive an hour and a half before the ceremony for a champagne reception. So the venue hadn't been asked to provide a champagne reception. And there were also a bunch of vendors of wedding suppliers there who had not been paid yet and were waiting to be paid and were already late being paid. The couple had asked me to stay on an MC for the reception, and I agreed. And now I know why they'd asked me to stay on, because they wanted me to kind of look after what was going on for that time before the ceremony as well. Well, the ceremony time came, no one was there, and I'd been calling the groom, still hadn't turned up, hadn't responded. Some of the guests left. Vendors were still waiting to be paid. He turned up an hour after the ceremony was due to begin. And then he called the bride and said, people are here waiting to be paid. And she said, don't worry, I'm going to stop on my way. I'm going to go to the cash machine. I will get cash out to pay them all. She arrived 2.5 hours after the ceremony was due to begin. Now I know another reason why I was asked to stay. And did not have any cash to pay the vendors. And I had a cake maker in absolute hysterics because she couldn't sell the cake to someone else. And they did all get paid eventually, but it took some months after the wedding. So the wedding ceremony took place. One thing that I learned was to always, if a couple are providing bits and pieces, you bring backup pieces as well. So they had the setup for a sand ceremony, but the bottle for the sand was broken. So I fortunately had my own. And after the wedding ceremony, they went off to have some pictures taken. By this time, more than half of the guests had left before the ceremony even began. They went off to have some pictures taken, and they came back from having pictures taken, and the bride was in tears. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Oh, I was planning on putting the dress back on eBay tomorrow, and I've just ripped the top layer of tulle." So I said, "Right, give me a pair of scissors." And I cut the top layer of tulle off, and I said, "Right, you can put it back on eBay, but make sure you dry clean it before you do." And I just came away thinking, yes, I delivered on what I was there to do, but it was such a chaotic experience. And I should have trusted my gut from the very get-go and not taken it. Although I saved someone else from having to do it. But yeah. So
I
now,
have never,
yeah,
ever done that.
I know. So now when I'm on discovery calls, I really, before I do a discovery call, I always have a moment of quiet and really check into, is this the one for me? Can I really serve this couple? Can I give them what they want, but also can they give me what I need? Because if I can't be at my best, they can't be at their best either. And I need to be at my best in order to be able to enable them to be at their best.
Mm.
And it's a mutually exclusive thing. So yeah, I now don't compromise.
That's
I,
a self-worth thing as
yeah,
well.
it absolutely is. And I have turned couples down where I've just not felt the vibe, because I know from experience that if I've not felt the vibe, it's not going to be a great experience.
And that's confidence and courage, which
Yeah.
comes from self-worth.
Yeah. I think when we first start as celebrants, we're keen to take on every booking that comes our way. Um, and sometimes you need to have those bookings in order to understand who you really are as a celebrant. So sometimes I'll have students that come to me and they say, I don't know who my ideal couples or clients are. I have no idea. And sometimes you need to have a few toads before you can find the prince and princess or whatever.
That's one hell of a toad, though.
Yeah.
That is, honestly, don't panic if you're listening. I don't know that that's going to happen again.
No.
That's like something off Gavin and Stacey. That's hilarious.
I know. I've been waiting for one of the Gavin and Stacey type weddings where they're standing up the top of the aisle and he decides that nope, he's not doing it. But no,
Oh
my
my God.
the couples I now work with are solid. But um, it never ceases to amaze me. I mean, I've heard some real horror stories from couples and who've been to other weddings, but also other celebrants and wedding suppliers. You know, for those couples who might be listening to this, I'm sorry, but wedding suppliers talk to each other, and when you get together and you're sitting, having dinner at a catching up with photographers and very musicians and stuff at ceremonies afterwards, um, everyone's attention turns to, so what was your favorite wedding and what was your worst? We always talk about it. We do.
I think that's true. I think that's why it's in my podcast, probably, but that's brilliant. What brilliant choices. Okay, next question. Are there any ceremonies in your own life? There's two parts to this. Any ceremonies in your own life where there's something you regret doing or not doing? And what would you, if you had a ceremony again or something in the future, something that you would incorporate that maybe you didn't know about before?
Yeah, in fact, our own wedding is a brilliant example. We've been married 20 years this year, so it's pertinent.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And this is part of the reasons why I became a celebrant, because our own experience was such a disaster. So because I was divorced, and it was an overseas divorce, when Matt and I got married, we went to the registry office. So celebrants, I didn't know celebrants existed. If they did exist in those days, I didn't know about it. So we decided that we were going to have a registry office legals with all of our out of town family and friends. And then the next day we were going to have a blessing taken by a Unitarian minister. So because my divorce took place overseas, we gave the registry office 6 months extra to corroborate our divorce, because they had to go to I think they had to check with the American embassy. You would think that if you had been unable to corroborate a divorce, you would get in touch with the couple. But oh no. So we get to our wedding, our legal day in the registry office in front of 40 of our family and friends. And in the middle of the ceremony, the registrar turned to my husband to be at that point and says, "Mr. Ash, we have to caution you. We've been unable to corroborate Miranda's divorce and you could be marrying a bigamist."
Oh my God. Those actual words.
I quote,
No.
I was furious, absolutely
That's
furious.
outrageous.
And they've never apologized. And I've talked to other registrars since who said I would never do that. I would always call them the day before and just let them know. That's awful. And then the next day we had a blessing in a beautiful venue, hottest day of the year, beautiful setup. I will admit I was a bridezilla. I tried
Were you?
whole thing. Yeah, I tried to organize the whole thing myself. The biggest mistake I made was not having an on-the-day coordinator. I should have done that. That's why I always advocate on-the-day coordinators for couples now. It just takes the pressure off you. But at the ceremony, so 3 weeks before our ceremony, our minister called us and said, "I'm so sorry, I've double booked myself and I can't do your ceremony." And I started to think, are we ever going to get there? And the minister that was available wanted to charge us 3 times the price. We simply didn't have it in the budget. So we asked a distant relative who was training to be an evangelical minister to do the ceremony.
This gets funnier and funnier. I'm sure at the time, not funny at all, but I think we're allowed to laugh about it now.
Yeah. So Matt, both of us were raised in Matt was raised in a religious environment, a Christian environment. I was raised in a very loosely Christian environment. But we wanted to bring a bit of that into the ceremony to honor our families, but we didn't want it to be too much. Well, on the day when you haven't done much in the way of weddings, you kind of don't know what you can and can't have, which is why as a celebrant, I totally advocate you breaking the rules and saying that there are no rules. Yes, you can have a judicial structure, but you don't have to follow that. But in those days, 20 years ago, no one talked to us about that. We just thought this is the way it's done. So this minister put us through premarital counselling. That was interesting.
Everybody's favorite thing.
And then he, in that counselling, said, well, in the Bible, it says that you, Miranda, should obey your husband and he should be prepared to die for you. And we said, please don't put that in the wedding because that's definitely not congruent with our beliefs.
I really can't see that being congruent.
And he put it in the wedding.
No!
So he did a sermon, and in the sermon, this is what he shared. And Matt's hand nearly fell off. I think I nearly broke his hand because I squeezed it so hard. My mum was seen holding my brother onto his chair because he was ready to get up and say something. He was so furious. And it's really it's unusual because we didn't get on, and I knew then that he actually was really supportive. And afterwards, a few of my friends who are really well-meaning and they just had a chat with the minister afterwards and just, not punching him up or anything. They just went and said, look, that's not kind of what's congruent with what they believe. And surely a ceremony should reflect what the couple believe, not what you believe. So that is part of the reason why, as a celebrant, I always say to couples, this ceremony isn't about me, it's about you. And if there's anything in the ceremony that is not congruent with what you believe, we need to take it out. So that's why I always allow my couples to see what's in the ceremony, because we don't remember our vows from our ceremony. We don't remember the rest of the ceremony. The only 2 things we remember are the fact that the registrar said that I could be a bigamist, and that, I was told I had to obey my husband and he had to die for me. We've never seen a copy of the script. We've never seen our vows since.
I mean, 100% that's true. I'm the same. I always get them checked out.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
But your stories are, you can see she's a storyteller. If you don't know Miranda already, first of all, there is nothing funnier than her being told that she has to obey. It's just ridiculous.
My feminist side came out. I was like,
feminist.
Like,
kick-ass feminist in the best sense, and also just I mean, it is also really, really, really funny, but I mean, it is definitely true that you would not put anything in that wasn't right for that
No,
person.
wouldn't. I mean, that's why I always check. It's why the creation of a script is a collaborative process because it's, yes, I'm writing it, but it's your wedding. And if I don't get something right, then I need to know. Case in point, doesn't happen often, but I did have a couple recently who sent the script back to me. And excuse me if you can hear the pneumatic drill outside. Hopefully it's not too bad. Um, this couple, I think, were very much wordsmiths, um, in a different way to me, and I had obviously got the expression of their story wrong. And they gave me really good feedback, so I was then able to rewrite the ceremony. It turns out there were a few details that they wanted in that they hadn't actually shared with me, and we then put those in. And you go through as many drafts as it takes until a couple's happy. Usually it's one or two drafts. Sometimes it can be more, and that's because it's their ceremony, so it's gotta be right.
Totally, and we have really thick skins at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So
I think that also relates to worth too, because, um, if you have a high sense of self-worth, you will take, um, feedback as it is, as feedback, and you will grow. You'll have a growth mindset. If you and I say this to students all the time, if you can't take my feedback, how are you gonna take a real couple's feedback? You need to be able to take feedback on board because, um otherwise you're not going to be able to deliver for someone. And when I'm working with a student who may have a low sense of self-worth, I have to deliver feedback in a very different way to them than I would normally. I want my couples to be brutally honest with me, and I'm happy to take brutal honesty. But sometimes, um, when you're working with others who don't have that sense of worth, you have to sandwich the feedback with praise on either side so that they know that you're helping to build them up, but you're also giving them nuggets to help them to grow.
absolutely, and it is just so important that that person, or those people on that day, feel like it's totally them. And
Yes.
there's nothing finer than people coming to you and saying, "You completely got them. How long have you known them?" And it
Yes.
is because you were obsessing at 3 in the morning over the details of that script and sending back and forth until it was perfect. It is
Yeah.
a hard process, but it's not personal because it's not about us. Totally. So
And
what about sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna move to the next question, so I don't wanna
Oh,
miss
well,
anything.
I was going to add to that. That's also partly why I'm a celebrant and not a registrar. That creative, iterative process is really important to me. Whereas if you're just having a formulaic, run of the mill ceremony, you won't have that iterative process, which is all part of the magic.
Magic, the poetry, and again, that's all about self-worth because it's about humanness
Yeah.
and the important and the worth of poetry and art and creativity and storytelling. So it's lovely. Is there anything you would do? Obviously, you do that whole thing differently, but is there anything that if you were to do a ceremony again, something that you would incorporate that you like if you had a chance to do it again?
Yeah, if we were to get, married or renew our vows, I would put something symbolic in that was meaningful to us. For sure, we didn't have that. Suffice to say, Matt has been completely put off renewing our vows based on our expense.
Yeah, I can see that. Also, would it involve donkeys and tequila?
If it involved tequila, maybe donkeys or maybe a llama, who knows? But no, he won't. But if we, in an ideal world, if we were to do it again, I would want to do something very quiet, just the two of us. We had actually thought of eloping in the first place anyway. And I would just do something on, maybe on top of a cliff or a beautiful spot with us and a celebrant and speaking our real authentic truth. He's not into public speaking, hence why I did the speech in our wedding, and hence why he doesn't want. I think in his head he thinks of our renewal is in front of everyone, and it simply doesn't have to be. That correlates with an experience I'm having with a couple at the moment who are they've got deeply personal vows, and I had this with a couple last year as well. Um, and their biggest fear was standing up and sharing those in front of their family and friends. And I said to them, "You don't have to. Why don't you share them the morning of or afterwards? Just the two of you go off and have a private moment and share them. You do not have to say your vows in front of everyone if it's not right for you." I had a couple last year who went to the back of the ceremony space under a tree and shared their vows whilst a friend played a song. And you can do that. That's the beauty with a celebrant. So I would shape a ceremony in a meaningful way that enabled everyone involved to feel comfortable.
I love that. And quite often you get extroverts marrying introverts. And so you might get somebody, and I've done a lot of work with people, neurodivergent people, and many people who have social anxiety,
Yes.
who hate being limelighty.
Yeah.
And that, you get all this stuff about bridezillas and, oh, it's all about the bride. Of course it's not, because it's also about whoever they're marrying.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it in a heteronormative way, but in any kind of queer relationship, there's always different personalities and different roles and stuff. And so you might have people who just don't want to be at the front. They've got an idea of being at the front. You can have it in a circle. You don't have to be at the front. You don't even have to stand up. And I really love what you're saying, because if you have someone in your relationship who's shy or just very private, I don't think enough is talked about that. I'm really glad you raised it, because people think it's all really big. And I think also this generation and a lot of people post-COVID have got a lot of social anxiety. They're
Yes.
not used to it anymore.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that post-COVID. There are different. This is again the beauty of working with a celebrant is you can shape the ceremony around whatever you need to feel comfortable. You don't have to share vows. You can do other stuff. I did one last year where the couple, it was the Norse pagan one. The couple didn't want to share vows. They felt like enough of it had been brought out in about how they feel about each other had been brought out in the story anyway. But they did want to say some commitments, and I wrote the commitments for them in the style of Elder Scrolls. I loved them. So that to them was their way of committing to each other. Um, and to your point about where you have people stand or sit or position, you don't have to be the center of attention at the top of the aisle. I love what you're saying about being in a circle, and that's actually what they do at Quaker weddings. They have a gathering circle, and everyone sits in a circle and shares some wisdom with the couple. Um, I think we can, as celebrants, position people in a way that is comfortable to them. I think there's an assumption that, and I've heard this from a lot of couples, there's an assumption that they have to stand up facing each other for the entire ceremony. And you do not. I always say to couples, you might want to think about sitting down for part of the ceremony because you're going to be on your feet a lot today if you're not careful. Um, you know, take some time to just check in with each other, sit down, have a drink. You don't even have to be facing the audience. You could be sitting in the front row if you wanted to, or later, wherever works for you. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Wow, I've loved this. I mean, we haven't done this enough. We always, whenever we meet up, we always say, why don't we do this more often? But we've been really good. We have always done it. I don't know, every year, every other year.
yeah,
And now we're closer. It's really easy. And
exactly.
Miranda comes to Brighton and we sit by the sea, which is fab. It's really, I mean, quite apart from anything else, I really value you. And I mean, all the self-worth thing. You have so much worth in my life. And I love you, and I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm massively happy that we met in Hebden Bridge that time, made that decision to both go there, and to share each other's journeys, the ups and downs of it, the mistakes and the successes and the changes and the pivoting. And I think whenever we get together, we share, but I don't think we've ever shared. We never have time, everybody. We we run out, don't we?
Yeah, but it's also because the nature of our friendship, we always have so much to talk about. There's never enough time. I mean, if you put the two of us in in a space for a whole weekend together, we would still not have enough time. Because I think we've got so many shared interests, but also shared knowledge to share with each other. I've always loved that. with your background in theology, we always have different discussions around, how our backgrounds and um, our learning shapes what we do as a celebrant. I love that because it's not just about standing up and delivering a ceremony. Anyone can do that. It's about what we put into that ceremony. The research that we've done, the our experience that we bring to that ceremony. And that's something that I know you hold with such reverence. And It's no mistake that we were all put in Hebden Bridge together all those
That's
years.
right. That's right. I think we've got very much, our values are very aligned. The way we go about things, it's very similar. I think when we got into it, it wasn't really that common. We were asked to do it by people in our lives. So we, like many of you who were studying, you got the call, or will you do this for me? I need my auntie to do it on my own. And so we had the same thing. That was our story. So we sort of ended up there because we'd been asked to be there. And it wasn't trendy. It wasn't a thing anyone else was doing. And no one had any idea what we were talking about if we said we were celebrants. So I think there's something really beautiful about the fact that we started out just being right for it and just being passionate about people and treasuring them and cherishing them. So that's where we're coming from. We didn't either of us really think, let's start a business and let's go out and do this. We did it because our hearts were in it and they remain in it. And my heart very much remains in this friendship. So I'm delighted. I've got one last question for you, which is, I nearly took this out and you'll be furious with me because you'll totally get why it's in. Everyone loves it, and I felt really cringe about it. But I asked people what gives them hope for humanity, which is a big question and possibly a bit cringy. But as soon as I ask people, they actually have an answer. So I'm going to ask you what gives you hope for humanity.
I think when I stood in front of a group of family and friends doing a ceremony, whether it's a funeral, celebration of life and naming, a wedding, a commitment ceremony, whatever it is, that gives me hope because the story that we're fed by the media looks very different to the story that's in front of me in that space in that moment. And when we all come together in community to celebrate love, to honor our loved ones, it stirs people to a change of base. We see the world in a different way. And that's really why we need to be doing more of this. It really is, because the world needs to understand that it's love that guides. It's not a politician or an ideology. And especially right now, with everything going on in the world, we need to come together in community a lot more um, and honor each other and see each other. It's about saying, I see you. It really, really is. It's about saying, I see you and I honor you, because the world would say that we don't see each other. But on a grassroots level, we do. That's why it's so important.
And you know what? That's on my website. I see you, I hear you, I get you. That's right. That's absolutely right. Being seen, and that's what we're doing it for.
Yeah. I just wrote a blog this week that was almost like a love letter to the trans community, because I've been so bothered by what we're seeing with court cases and with the rise of transphobia as well as homophobia. And I think that's why I am so passionate about being an ally. And it's a learning process. Do I get it right every time? No. Do I learn from it? Yes. Do I ask for correction and for feedback? Yes. But that's a community which is right now being challenged, and people are the media would have us say that we are not seeing them, we're not getting them. And as a celebrant, I strive to do that regardless of who I'm working with, and our trans community just as much as a hetero community. So yeah, really important.
Amen. Absolutely. In fact, we should have a chat about what we can do as celebrants, maybe.
100%. I
Yeah.
think we have to What,
Mm.
because especially when this is the point I was making in that blog, when you have certainly for marriage, when you are unable to use your pronouns and the name that you've chosen for yourself in your legal ceremony, which is totally wrong, we as celebrants can create the space for the people to use their correct name and pronouns and celebrate and honor that. So
I
yeah.
love that you said that. I love that you said that. That is so important. Well, let's get our heads together. And if anyone out there in our constellation has any ideas about how we as celebrants can support our trans friends, do get in touch with me or Miranda and let us know. Speaking of which, where can they find you?
So just go to mirandacelebrant.co.uk. I'm also Miranda the Celebrant on Instagram, and reach out to me in either of those places. And I would love to have a chat with people on any of these topics. I'm always here to help. And again, that helps bring us all together, closer together as human beings.
Well, everybody, I mean, round of applause and thank you so much for coming. Actually, I was going to switch up my podcast spiel and have a little thing at the end that I thought was really clever, and I've forgotten what it was now. We have reached the end of our podcast today. It's time for our farewell. I would like to thank you. Would you please be upstanding constellation for Miranda the Celebrant?
Yay!